Hello, my name is Rob Edwards. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, and today begins the deconstruction of Season 1 of Wheel of Time. This is the first of 3 or 4 videos that I've got planned, and it may expand to more, who knows yet, about a kind of debriefing about Season 1, my overall impressions of it. And because I am by nature a generally positive kind of guy, I wanted to start today with a discussion of the things which I genuinely think the show did better than the books. Now, this is not to say that everything that it did was better. I am going to be doing another video about the things which I think the show has definitively done worse than the books. But in the interest of being fair and balanced, I'm going to be talking about 5 and an honourable mention in both categories. So, and I should say before I get into this, of course this means full spoilers for both Series 1 and Book 1 of The Wheel of Time. So if you haven't read Book 1 yet, and get on that frankly, then this video is probably not for you. So I'm going to be talking about my top 5 things that I think the show does better than the books. Let's get into it. First up, something of an honourable mention. This is essentially the question about who is the Dragon Reborn. Now, the reason I'm putting this in honourable mention is it's one of those things which I don't think the book really attempted to do. I don't think the book really ever presented this as a mystery. I think it was fairly obvious through most of the book where it was going. The fact that most of the book is told from Rand's point of view made it fairly obvious who the central character of this piece was going to be. But I think the show making this change, changing the emphasis to create this question mark over who the dragon might be, was to the betterment of the show. I've seen a fair number of reactions and reviews of Season 1 now, and a lot of people, a lot of the non-book readers anyway, were really kind of intrigued and fascinated by this idea of who the dragon might be. My wife, who'd never read the book, immediately spotted that it was going to be Rand, but I don't think that was necessarily representative of everybody who watched the show. I think they did a fairly good job of having this mystery pique people's curiosity and pull them into the show. So this isn't something the show's done better than the book, because the book wasn't even trying to do this. But I think it was a good choice by the show. If you watched my top 5 characters from Eye of the World video that I put out before the show aired, I talked about how Matt Cawthon was one of my favourite characters across the entire of Wheel of Time. But in Eye of the World, I didn't really think he made much of an impression. His one main thing that he does in the book is become infected by the dagger from Shadar Logoth, and we see him spiral into his Shadar Logoth infected version of himself in the latter half of the book. Apart from that, Matt is not a very interesting character in Book 1. And I think the show made a big deal out of Matt in Season 1, and I think Barney Harris was fantastic in the role. It's not quite the same as the character in the book, but that's because the character in the book doesn't have a character in the book. They've changed a bit of Matt's backstory. His family relationships are not as good in the show as they are in the books, but that just basically gives him something to be pushing against, something for him to be struggling against, something for him to want. And also gives him a reason to join the group leaving the Two Rivers. The fact that he cares so much about his 2 younger sisters, it makes sense that he was going to protect them by leaving. He may not have been into the whole prophecy and whatever, but if there was an element of truth to this tale that his presence might be putting his sisters in danger, he would leave. And I think that's actually a really positive thing. And throughout the show, he is funny, he is caring. I talked again in episode 2, I think, where it's Matt who starts the Song of Manetheren, because He knows, he cares that his friends are so down at the moment and need their spirits lifting. I think that's fantastic. And when we see him change, the infection of the dagger, really, really fascinating to watch the way Barney plays it. I think Matt Colton is a big win over the books for the first season of Wheel of Time, which makes it such a shame that Barney is not back for season 2. But perhaps Donalfin will be even better. Looking forward to finding out. Another thing which I think the show has done much better than Eye of the World did is set up the relationship for Lan and Nynaeve. I think because we get more from the point of view of Nynaeve, because we get to see these two together and get to see their interactions and see their relationship growing, I think when we get to the end of the show and Lan is doing his famous speech, "I will hate the man you choose because he isn't me," and all that, I think the show has earned it by that point. I actually think, as I said in my review of episode 8, that moment didn't work as well as it should because it was lost in all the other stuff that was going on in that moment. And I think that moment is done better in the book. But getting to that moment, making the relationship between these two more believable, absolutely works better in the show. And so many of the people I've been watching reviews and reactions for the show got really into this. And I think that was a really hugely positive thing that the show did over the books. Putting more emphasis on Loghain's story. We see a little bit of Loghain in the first book, but really not very much, and mostly from a distance. Getting in a bit closer with him, seeing his background, seeing how the corruption is affecting him, as we have in this image here, I think were both brilliant moments in the show, allowing us to give a bit more depth to the concern about, if the dragon is a male channeler, what is that going to mean for him, to really understand what the corruption represents. And I think having more emphasis on Loghain and telling Loghain's story was a really clever choice, and I'm very happy they did it, and thumbs up from me, basically. Smaller point, this one, because it's not a major part of season 1, certainly not the way it's presented in the show, but I hate the Tuatha'an in book 1. I think the time that Perrin and Egwene spend with them is just dull and drags the book down. I really dislike the character of Aram. I don't really kind of connect with this idea of the Way of the Leaf. Despite myself being something of a pacifist in the real world, I don't really connect with the way it's represented in the books. But in the show, I actually genuinely became interested in this group of people. I thought the guy playing Aram was fantastic. I think I said in my review, I actually liked Aram in the show. I hate him in the book. He's just annoying. And I hope that if we see him again, that will continue. Because I think Aram makes a much more interesting character in the show than in the book. And the presentation of the Way of the Leaf in the show is also more interesting, more relatable. When the is it Rain? I forget the name of the lead woman of the Tuatha'an. When she's talking about her daughter and wanting the Way of the Leaf to make things better not for her, not for her daughter necessarily, but for the world that her daughter comes back to when the wheel spins her out again. Really interesting, really emphasizing the good stuff that the mythology of the world is able to let them do. This whole kind of reincarnation and turning of the wheel thing. The Way of the Leaf makes a lot more sense when it is presented like that. And honestly, it's been sufficiently long enough that I paid any attention to the Tinker chapters in the books. I do mostly skim through them quite quickly because I find them so dull that I actually really engaged with them here in the show. And that is a positive for me. And the last thing that I think that the show does so much better than the books is making the White Cloaks a threat. I think throughout most of Book 1 and through most of the series, if I'm honest, generally speaking, the White Cloaks are not really convincing antagonists. They're kind of bumbling buffoons for the most part. There are exceptions to that, and there are certain characters when they are played up to later on. There is a relationship between the White Cloaks and a non-White Cloak, let's put it like that, which really, really I find interesting, and how it plays into particularly Perrin's story later on. But I think what they've done here with Eamon Valder to make him such a dislikable and intimidating character, I think is fantastic. This guy is brilliant. His performance is amazing. And you really feel that the White Cloaks are a danger. You really feel that the White Cloaks are a threat. So there we go. Those are the 5 things that I felt the show did better than the books. But I'm really interested to hear from you guys as well. So you tell me, what do you think the show did better? I'm really interested in keeping this conversation a positive one. Don't tell me all the things it did worse. There's going to be a video for that later on. You can comment on that to your heart's content. I really want to focus on the things, the small details that you found an improvement in the show over what the same thing was in the books. I'm really interested to hear what people have to say. So, for now though, that is everything from me. Join me next week when we will be getting into the more land of negativity and we talk about those things that the show did not live up to. But for now, thank you very much for joining me and I will catch you next time. Cheers.